Humanity struck a happy medium in thought when it came to scientific progress, meticulous and patient enough to begin understanding the universe around them, yet brash and crazy enough to make the odd leap of genius every decade or so. They made their way to orbit around their home planet, then onwards to the planets orbiting their home star, much like the rest of the developed galaxy. But they grew in ways other races didn't even imagine. It's a question of how much their advancement, however, is owed to their happy medium or their centuries-long entrapment. The key to faster-than-light travel was mathematics, left behind by the precursors for the younger races to find in beacons scattered on their homeworlds throughout the galaxy. No single race had ever become true star voyagers without the assistance of the beacons. Sooner or later, they would find the beacon on their planet, decrypt it, and use that knowledge to spread through their sector of the galaxy before meeting those who made the process before. But not the children of Earth. By circumstances lost to history, maybe from a worried precursor who feared for humanity's welfare, or a malevolent precursor's deliberate sabotage, the beacon for humanity left behind a different message. When humans unearthed and decrypted the beacon in East Africa during the 22nd century CE, instead of receiving a key to the locks of lightspeed, they got a warning. There are monsters beyond the rim. They knew our technology, superseded it. They intended it that way. You must walk a different path. Stay in this system. Stay safe until you feel you are ready. Humanity was frustrated, excited, terrified, and galvanized by this message. The technology within the beacon itself was centuries ahead of what anyone on Earth had. This was no hoax. But as advanced as this race was, it didn't help them against these monsters. How could we, humanity argued, defend against them? The message was clear, though. As long as the human race stayed within Sol, it was safe. So humanity made the great exodus into space the hard way. One by one, old hatreds died, the damage done to Earth was reversed, the colonies on the Moon and Mars flourished and expanded, and the inner and outer planets were reached. The asteroid belt was harvested, metal and ice fueling the expansion, making great stations in deep space, each holding millions of souls. Mercury was cracked and reorganized into solar stations around the sun. Not forgetting the warning, humanity redoubled its efforts in science and technology, making its own path. Everything from medicine to robotics was met with renewed vigor and larger budgets. Prototypes for the first space-borne warships that will no doubt be needed to fight these monsters were designed, built, then redesigned and built again. The war with disease was won, energy shortages were relegated to the history books, and computers became increasingly complex and capable. A major breakthrough was made with the advent of quantum computational substrate, the new silicon in electronics. Operations of a level unmatched in human history became commonplace. Then arguably one of the biggest leaps of genius in history was made. The uploading of a human brain into a computer was an ancient theme in fiction, but now it was finally possible. The procedure was initially restricted to volunteers on their deathbeds, then the super rich. But as it was honed over the centuries, eventually everyone who reached the age of 25 was given the chance to be uploaded. Their mind, their intelligence, was transferred from their organic brain to a small box about the size of a hand filled with substrate. That box, and by extension the individual, could be connected to a virtual simulation or to a robotic platform in the real world. The platform could range from a body with the looks and sensory feedback of an organic body, although with cybernetic augmentations, to more obviously mechanical bodies for roles such as construction or security, to those of non-bipedal machines, even spaceships. The box can seamlessly transition from one body or sim to another, so an individual could spend their working day as an assembly mech, then come home in their human platform with skin, hair, sweat, tactile feedback, the works. This changed society forever. Death became non-existent, only happening to those who believed they had seen enough centuries. The population exploded because having kids was as possible and as enjoyable as ever. The effects of this explosion, today breaking through the 1 trillion mark, was negated almost entirely by the much lower demands of uploaded. Small stations could now house sims of huge megacities, millions of minds, and the larger stations could hold entire planets, billions. It is no cornucopia one must achieve if they desire wealth, but no one could be said to be poor or malnourished. E-democracy was established. Major decisions could be debated and decided upon at the speed of light by participants, and anyone could be a participant. Humanity staggered on, unlocking one secret of the universe after another, adding ships to the ever-growing fleet dedicated to protecting Sol. They had no measure of the monster's military strength, if they even still existed. All they knew was that for every ship built, every soldier trained, and every anti-proton generated, their chances of survival increased. But it would still count for naught if they couldn't even leave the system. FTL drive was proven to exist by the beacon, but the physics behind it was such a monumental problem to solve. Still, every generation since the warning dedicated experts to the cause of unlocking this technology. Until finally, 1974 years since the first manned mission to the moon, a test ship holding a prototype FTL drive departed Earth, arriving at Mars in 5 minutes, when light would take 20 minutes to make the same journey. Even then, after the system-wide rejoicing, humanity took its time finishing the latest additions to the fleet and upgrading every ship. Only then a small flotilla was sent on the maiden voyage to Proxima Centauri, arriving in mere hours. Thankfully, giant space monsters primed to kill all humans didn't jump out of nowhere, so the cautious march forward went on, ships exploring the nearby systems for any sign of the precursors, the younger races, or worst-case scenario, the monsters. Captain Vishubris sat at his chair on the bridge of the cruiser EWS Apex, an image of Lumian martial discipline on the outside, a soul reeked with boredom on the inside. For the past 2 months, his little flotilla has been turning over every rock in a 500 light-year radius. The galactic space-time sensor net had picked up field distortions, unmistakable signatures of FTL travel in this section of the Orion Arm, in the Lumian Empire, military backbone of civilized space and neighbor to this not yet colonized region, was tasked to investigate. No other race admitted to having interests here, so it must either be pirates setting up safe havens or those savages, the Idanar, overstepping their borders. Either way, it was something that could be solved by a sufficiently large gun, and the proud fleets of the Lumian Empire had the biggest of them all. Vishubris grinned at that thought, only to remind himself that first, they had to be found. Not one enemy of civilization had yet been found, and the luxury food rations had just been depleted. Vishubris looked around his bridge, the crew restless, visibly irritated in the case of some, but everyone kept it to themselves, as they should. Even the lowliest enlisted were professionals, and a shortage of seed buns and methamphetamine wasn't going to cause a mutiny. Of course, getting to vaporize some pirates would brighten the mood somewhat. As if the souls of creation themselves listened in on his thoughts, his wish for action was granted. "Sir, unknown convoy has entered from FTL, bearing 85 degrees right, 17 degrees down. Extreme long range," sensor specialist Devonius gave in his best bridge speak, loud, clear, without accent or figure of speech. Nobody should have to say something twice in a life-or-death situation. The statement of facts by the specialist awakened the entire ship, and the flotilla by extension, from its half-slumber, as eyes open and back straighten, ready for orders from the captain. "What's their signature? Is this friend or foe?" replied Vishubris, the daring warrior in his mind, the one that got him this commission, secretly hoped foe. "Again, unknown, sir. Their ships don't match any in-service designs amongst all races, and they look to be in too good a condition to be salvaged." "Ah, somebody has been testing their shiny new toys without telling the rest of us," Vishubris thought without speaking. "Probably the Siltorians. They always keep something to themselves. No matter, the jinx is up, and the sooner we settle this, the sooner we get home. Hail them, it's probably an ally doing a shakedown run on a new ship. As a precaution, put the flotilla on orange alert. Every ship in the flotilla begins the turn towards the new contacts, their shields charging and weapons loading, just in case. A burst of radio waves emit from EWS Apex to the unknowns. "This is Captain Vishubris of the Lumian Empire warship Apex. State your allegiance and intentions, or you will be fired upon. If he gave that message to a civilian ship, he might have been court-martialed. But this was obviously an experimental warship that was rather too close to the Lumian border. Empire comes first, and anyone who complains about their people dying could go talk to the diplomats. Silence greeted the flotilla, the unknowns staying still in space. No reply signal, no emissions implying a charging drive core or powering weapons, nothing. Okay, let's try that again. Unknown vessels, state your intentions or risk engagement. Every race has known of and codified each other's languages for centuries, so every translator on their ships being faulty was no excuse. They should be able to detect the Lumian flotilla, so some kind of response was to be expected. Chief Dermains, give them a warning shot. They should listen to that. Aye, sir. As the Apex's main gun charged, just about to accelerate a small tungsten pebble to 57.8% of light speed, every computer in the flotilla crashed. Monitors plunged into darkness, the hum of the drive core faded, and shields flickered out of existence. The counter-cyber warfare suite activated backups, and connections between the flotilla rematerialized. Cyber attack! Why weren't the firewalls up? Vishubris groaned at the lapse in judgment of the unfortunate officer, who'll have a good telling off when this was over. They were up, sir! They broke through them in seconds! Cried Cyber Warfare Officer Siptus, a hint of panic in his voice. The rest of the bridge crew didn't understand the electronic warfare package installed in Apex quite like he did, but they shared his fear. The EWP was the jewel of the Apex's most recent retrofits, one particularly hush-hush project from the fleet's labs. A trained cyber warfare officer with a standard EWP on the opposite number of Apex could bust through the first level of defenses in maybe 30 minutes. For the entire system to be so thoroughly dismantled in such a short space of time implied a mastery of cyber intelligence magnitudes beyond anything in the Lumian arsenal. What else does this damn convoy have in store? What Devanius had to say next brought both relief and dread to the bridge. Sir, all ships have went to FTL. They seem to have done a 180 before jumping, so they likely retreated, putting their likely destination on screen. It was less a screen and more a 3D hologram projector positioned in the center of the room. 2D screens to project 3D star maps had long gone obsolete. A medium main sequence star, 58 light-years away, was highlighted. From what they knew, this was the base of the unknowns. The attack on the flotilla was seemingly being dealt with. No physical damage was done, and no crew died, though the data logs were filled to capacity with junk bits. Captain Vishubris made a decision. Call Fleet Command. Tell them we made contact with the target. It's a small convoy of highly experimental starships, most likely on a shakedown cruise. We've had a serious cyber attack, but are completely operational, and are pursuing to their likely base. Transmit the likely home star's coordinates in case we don't make it back. Vishubris stared through the cockpit window, and the insensible, unphysical glow of overspace stared back. Apex and its flotilla was likely just 5 minutes away from exiting overspace and landing in the unknown base of operations, face first. Helmsman Filtham shot a cocky grin at the captain. Don't worry, sir. I'll be here flying the ship while you can run to the escape pod. If this was the age of wooden ships traveling through water by power of wind, the captain could throw him overboard. Today, he could only give him laundry duty, but Vishubris and Filtham went back a long way and learned how to deal with each other. I appreciate that, Filtham. I'd hate to see my ship break apart, but knowing the smartest-lipped helmsman I ever served with was on board would cheer me up. Vishubris turned and marched back to his chair. The bridge was a hive of activity, crew checking everything under their respective commands, ensuring everything was in peak condition. Some taking a sip of water, others a shot of stims, a few reciting a quiet prayer to themselves, wishing the souls bless them with either a good hunt or a noble end. In the last 30 seconds before re-entry, Vishubris considered how this might affect the big picture. What if they did find the super-secret tech lab of another race? Could they even hope to last against a base that would be so well defended? Would they go to war over it being threatened? What if these were pirates, in which case the whole empire is vulnerable from whatever criminals funded the building of those ships? Would any of his crew ever see home again? Leaving FTL in 3 tote. What Vishubris saw blew all other questions out of his mind. The map lit up with the signatures of hundreds of thousands of ships, several times more than all the fleets of the Lumian Empire put together. 200 or so were 20 kilometers long, either huge dreadnoughts with more guns than that of several small colonies, or an alien design, a hull similar to the dreadnoughts, but with what looks like a hangar space big enough to dwarf Apex, holding thousands of fighters a pop. Anyone could glass a city in a minute. The bulk of the frigate and above signatures were the cruisers, or at least those that were arranged like cruisers, since each one was at least twice the length of Apex. The remainder were frigates, either providing screening for the bigger ships or in their own wolf packs. Just as soon as he collected himself enough to wonder how anyone could build such a huge fleet, Vishubris was at least partially answered. A huge ring of space stations, most hundreds, some thousands of kilometers long, were arranged in rings around the star, one near the sun, with huge solar collectors and mighty microwave transmitters beaming power across the system, the other between the outermost rocky planet and the innermost gas giant, with shipyards filled with yet more crafts, asteroids within different stages of being tugged to base, mined, and refined. Once again, the flotilla suffered a cyber attack, this one far more effective than the last. All control of the ships were lost, the drive cores coming to a stop and the shields dropping. The flotilla was now totally at the mercy of this new force. Unbeknownst to the Lumians, 1 trillion minds entered the largest, hottest debate in their history, a debate on what to do with these intruders. Some spoke with confidence, some with fear, others with compassion, and more than a few with blind fury. When the ship's data logs were scanned and absorbed, relief flowed through an entire society. These are members of the young, like us. They do not mean us harm, nor do they have the capacity to do so. Then let's kill them, and their entire race. We must prepare for the return of the monsters, and their resources are better spent in our hands. And if the monsters are waiting for someone to ignite galactic war, to finish everyone off when they're at their weakest, what then? To their laws, we are illegal. Nothing but mindless machines. Why bother wasting time with diplomacy if we are less than animals to them? Peace, war, peace, war. Even after an hour of system-wide feedback, billions of viewpoints collected, refined, assimilated, and broken apart again for more data, all happening at the speed of light, a compromise solution was needed. More time was needed to make a decision. Shields and weapons were still inactive, but the drive core was suddenly brought back online. Booming from the flotilla's PA system, that hijacked too, was a simple message in perfect Lumian. We are humanity, and this is Saul. Leave!